Hello and welcome to the Car Auto Reviews channel, and welcome to the 2024 Honda Passport. In today's video, we're going to do a proper technical review under the hood. We're going to take a look underneath it, inside and out. We'll talk about some things we like, some things we do not like, right after this. Let's start our technical review with the engine. Now, the powertrain on the Passport is exactly the same of that of the Ridgeline. So let's dive into it, starting with the engine. So this has a very old school V6. It's a 3.5 liter J35Y6. This is actually a timing belt engine in 2024, which is almost a thing of the past. So this has plastic valve covers at the top. This is one of the revisions of this engine. Got it, the plastic valve covers. They seem to be decent quality. Now this is a single overhead cam engine. Unlike the Pilot, which got the updated V6, this still have the old dinosaur. Now this old dinosaur have something that is not very old school like. Has variable cylinder management, or VCM. What that means is, in English, cylinder deactivation. Very unhappy word for us in 2024. So here's how this works. You have three modes of operation for the variable cylinder management. When you are cruising, it will run at 3 cylinders. It will shut down an entire bank. And then when you're in light acceleration, it'll run on 4 cylinders and shut down 2. And when you're in heavy acceleration, it'll go to 6. And here's how it achieves that. So it does that with the rockers. So it has dual rockers for each cylinder, and then it has this piston that can move in and out. When you want to activate them, it's going to engage both of these rockers. So when the cam pushes them, they're actually going to open the valves. But when you want to disengage that cylinder, you're going to pull that piston. Now only one of these rockers, it's a dummy rocker that'll move, and the other one won't actually open the valve, and you'll effectively shut down that cylinder. Now shutting down cylinders has never been a good idea long term, because the heat will drop on that one cylinder, and what they tend to do as time goes on, if the mechanism itself doesn't fail, you have cylinder wall damage, kind of oil burning. These are the problems that they have down the road, and that is the downside of variable cylinder management. Now moving away from that, this only has direct injection, which is just one more insult to injury, if you would. This doesn't have port injection. It only has direct injection. So carbon buildup is possible if you drive it in certain driving conditions or bad maintenance habits. It is very possible with this engine. Now moving away from that to the cooling system, super simple cooling system, because this has a timing belt, water pump is driven by the timing belt, thermostat mechanical, no management valve or whatnot. Everything is very, very basic. Now, speaking of the direct injectors, we kind of skipped that a little bit. The direct injectors sit underneath the intake manifold, which is not a intake manifold that protrudes over the engine. So access to the rear spark plugs, very simple. Although a little bit of a stretch, because this engine sits very low in this car, but still you do have that. And the high pressure fuel pump sits just to the side of the valve cover, which is a good spot for it, I think. Now, because of the VCM, that whole thing, this engine will vibrate a lot when you're in these modes. So they had to add a pretty sophisticated engine mounting system, and they have noise cancellation just to kind of counteract that vibration when you go into 3-cylinder or 4-cylinder mode. That is there to keep things smooth, and smooth they are. This engine is very smooth, even when it's operating in the 3-cylinder or the 4-cylinder mode. Now let's talk about the transmission here. This is a 9-speed transmission from ZF, a German manufacturer. Now Honda did have a little bit of an interesting history with transmission reliability, so they went to ZF for their newer cars. It's a great transmission, actually, with one major quirk with it. So the ZF transmission, by design, it's always defaults in parks. Let me explain. So when the car is off and you don't have hydraulic pressure, it's always engaged in park. So the parking pawl is engaged. When you start the engine and the oil pump for the transmission starts turning, that's what actually hydraulically disengages park when you take it out of park. So you don't really have a mechanical shifting action. It all happens hydraulically, which is controlled electronically. So most of the cars that have a ZF transmission, they don't have a physical shifter. But equally, If you can't run the engine or crank it for half an hour or more, it defaults into park and you cannot get it out of park. So most cars that have a ZF transmission, they will have some kind of manual cable that'll pull that pawl so you can take it out of park and you can push it if you need to. Here's how Honda did that. Yeah. Well, if you look at the top of the transmission, there's a little lever that you can barely see in reach. You have to turn that to take it out of park. If you need to, in case of an emergency, starter is out and you're stuck on the side of the road and you need to push it on the tow truck because it took an hour for it to come in. Yeah. I don't know why they didn't do a better release, but hey, at least they gave you something, just almost like nothing. Moving away from that, looking around here, other than the VCM, which is a concern, and the lack of the safety release for the park and pawl, everything here is typical Honda. Well made, plastics feel good, everything feels good, with one small, just tiny observation. The battery, 12-volt battery, sits under the hood, it's great. But I don't understand why is it covered with this giant behemoth thing that you have to remove this entire cover, remove this just to access the other terminal. Why do they do that? I don't understand why manufacturers do that. Second thing is, this iteration of this engine, because this car has electric power steering, you don't have a pump per se, makes the timing belt service actually simpler. And that is a nice thing. And speaking of the timing belt, this does have the oil pump that is driven by the nose of the crank, so you have a crank seal, and things are very old school. And you do have to service this timing belt, which is a little bit of cost of maintenance, but the good side of that is these engines runs very smooth and they're very quiet because you don't have a loud chain, which is nice. Let's take a look underneath the Honda Passport. Now, this is a Trail Sport edition, so it does have this pretty heavy-duty shield, but I guess the transmission didn't make the cut for the heavy-duty shield, even though it hangs lower, because here's that ZF transmission. Now, this is typical Honda business as usual. If you come around, single-piece oil pan that is aluminum with the drain plug that's, if you over tighten it, it will strip. That's just how they do things. Now here's something interesting. Now we put this heavy shield, and you can tell that this is a different department, the department that designed the entire car. You have to take this to drain the oil. I mean, why couldn't we just make a small cutout here? I mean, transmission is all exposed for off-roading stuff, but nonetheless, that's how they did it. Let's look at the front suspension here. Aluminum lower control arm with a ball joint that is part of it. This is a McPherson setup. You see how the strut goes into the knuckle with a bolt, and it was just bolted down instead of that. This is a steel knuckle, but you notice it's not coated, so it has like a rusty appearance to it because it just doesn't have any coating on it. Dual piston caliper in the front for the brakes, which is nice. It's a little bit of a bigger SUV. As we walk away from that, there's something I don't understand why they did that. You notice the catalytic converter is right here. So for the longest time, at least that I remember, Honda used to put their catalytic converter here. You used to have a flange like this, and immediately another flange here. Well, they don't have that anymore. So basically, if your flex pipe right here decides to leak, you have to replace the entire pipe. If this flex pipe leaks, this entire pipe with a catalytic converter that's expensive has to be replaced. Wish they haven't done that, but that's how they did it. Now, the Passport, as of 2024, it doesn't have a two-wheel drive model. It's always all-wheel drive. So here's that transfer case, which is always sending power to the rear. And then if we follow that all the way to the rear differential, you notice they have a little motor on the side. That's what actually engages all-wheel drive, because it's not engaged all the time. Things are a little bit on the old school side here, folks. You see, you have a lot of exposed body. Very nice seam sealer here. I don't have any concerns about that, although it would be nice to cover this a little better. Just openings right here, but not the end of the world. Let's look at the rear suspension here. Aluminum knuckle, steel arms that hold everything in the suspension and in the rear. You do have a coilover or a strut, not separate shock and spring, which is nice. Single piston caliper. You notice this one does not have the park and brake on it. Of course, this is old school. Still has cable right here, and park and brake shoes and the rotor hat and whatnot. Then we look all the way in the back. Very interesting sway bar link that just kind of sticks out from everything. Very wide open space here, and same thing, even though this is a little bit of an older school design, I mean, this is wide open, and the other side as well. I don't know why manufacturers do this, just leave you these big voids without covering them. Well, they'll fill up with mud and dirt and all kinds of stuff. But the nice thing here is, because this is a little bit on the older school side, although when we looked at the Pilot, it's the same thing. The build quality here, it's proper. Now the exhaust is a good quality, but it's not, historically Honda has not had the best exhaust in the world, but it's decent. The only small thing that I have, this is a V6, and this is a very tiny pipe here. That's very interesting to see it. Yes, they are dual, but it's a tiny pipe when you compare this one to, say, this one. This one is a little bigger than that. I don't know what happened there. That's just what they deemed necessary here. Let's take a look at the outside of the Honda Passport. Now, this front design is kind of a cross between the Pilot and the Ridgeline, the old Pilot, new Pilot, current Ridgeline. It's very interesting. So the headlights are very identical to the Ridgeline, just curved in a different way. And the Honda badge, which has the radar sensor behind it, is massive. This is oversized, I think. And then the Trail Sport is very important. Talk about that a little bit. So here's something interesting about this. So the design is very basic. They're not over the top. The grille is a very typical Honda design. There's one thing I just wonder. Doesn't it look like the hood is open? It's actually not. And I don't know what happened here. Why couldn't we just make this go up a little bit more and kind of meet it instead of having this? It just doesn't look nice. That's about the only thing, but it has a very quintessential Honda look. There's one interesting thing though about that. This part is so high and this part is not very high, so you have this massive jump here. You can actually see it from inside the car, and you can see the washers and everything. I don't know what to deal with that. You even made this extra large just to try to cover this up. Usually manufacturers will not put this black area this big. I don't know what happened there. I feel like this was a cross between multiple designs. Now, this being a Trail Sport, you do have these very loud, unnecessary tires. I really don't like off-road tires in a car that would have went off-road normally without these tires, but nice wheels though, I'll give it that. Black mirrors, and behind the black mirrors is the part that I like the most, this tiny little glass. I mean, they went through so much length to put that there, and it's great for visibility. It gives you a little bit of an extra window to look through. I really like touches like that. Otherwise, on the side, there isn't a lot going on. You do have kind of the secondary line for the arches, and then this line starts. Interestingly, this line kind of have a curve up, then it disappears. Just to extra emphasize the rear here. It's a very basic design, and you notice because of the basic design, low belt line, large window equals very good visibility, and that you do get out of this. Visibility here is really good. I mean, look at this glass. Even this glass is very tall, very wide. They didn't make a big swoop here, make this tiny. No, this is very big, and that is good. Now, this is, of course, being an old school side, the touch sensor. So you do have a touch sensor to open it, but to lock it, you have to press a button. You don't have another touch area. I suppose I can live with that. You don't have to be confused of, okay, I press the button, it's locked, then you press it again real quick and it unlocks, and it's like, okay, where are we at? No, you pull the handle to unlock it and just press this to lock it, which is fine. In this segment, we're not expecting it to have one in the rear, it's just in the front, which is perfectly fine. Then we walk around the back, and this is where, so this, if you look at the previous Pilot, this looks exactly the same. It's just missing the rest of it. They're trying really hard to distinguish the two models, even though I don't see the point between us. We'll talk about that a little bit in the video, but the tailpipes are very interesting here. So do you notice how they're curved this way? And when you stand here, it almost looks like that side is sticking up. It should be other way around, but that's how they deemed it. Now the badging, not too bad. You have the Honda badge here. Passport, so this is actually an old name that they revived. All-wheel drive, even though they're all-wheel drive now, so I don't know why we need this. Transport, very important part. Now here's the interesting part. Normally in an SUV like this, you expect the button to open it to be here. This one is actually down here. Not a big problem. It's of course a power door here. With a couple things. One good thing, one not so good thing. First thing is the power motor. We always talk about this where the wire goes here or here. You notice this one, the wire goes into the back door, which is the proper place. If you ever need to replace this, you're not tearing half the car down. You just pull this panel, the wire is right there. That is a good part. The not so good part is, I actually cheaped out and only put one. Because this one, even though it looks like that one, you notice it has no wire here, no wire here. This is just a normal shock. Now that's the bad thing, because when you lift the motor on one side, eventually this door will start twisting because you're always pulling it from one side. Over time, this may be an issue. The good thing is, if this motor ever goes out, you can just go buy one of these, put it here, and we have a manual door. We don't have to spend a fortune on this shock. So there's good and bad and everything. Now this being old school, we don't have any lighting here. We don't have lock button here. We just have to close it and that's it. Now the rear area, you notice the gleaming absence of a third row seat. This is not a 3-row SUV. However, it's pretty big, but I feel like the load floor is high. That's the one thing about this. And if you fold the seats, which has this very nice just button, you press it and it doesn't come back up, but I think this is as easy as possible. It's a pretty decent space, but I feel like it's not as, could be bigger because the floor is very high. It's just, I don't know how to describe it, but the floor is high here. Now, if you look here, you have a big storage area. And then if you try to lift this, it kind of just doesn't want to go. And this is the part where I don't know what happened here. So you unlock this, and then you pull this entire thing, which almost feels like you're disassembling the car. And then this comes out. And you have the spare tire here. And right next to it is a speaker. So the entire space that would otherwise be for the third row seat was taken up by a spare tire and a speaker. A spare tire which would fit perfectly underneath it. So yeah, we don't have a third row seat in this. I want you to keep that in mind, because as we move through the video, this will start to make sense why I am emphasizing this. Now, if we close this door, this is the part that just kind of confused me a little bit. This is an old school model. It's been out for a bit. There's no bumper. There's literally anything you hit will destroy the back door, and there's no room for error. Yes, you have this sticking out a little bit, but I feel like this is when they were starting with this stuff. I don't like it because we all make mistakes. You back into something, now you damage your door, versus having a little bit of a bigger bumper. You have a little bit room for forgiveness, if you would. This one doesn't have that. Let's take a look at the interior of the Honda Passport. And oh, what a breath of fresh air this is. It is a no-nonsense interior. It's not gimmicky and over the top. It is everything that you need in a car. It is there where you expect it to be, and it works great. The end of the story. I mean, just look at the center stack here. The infotainment system, although a little bit showing its age, but it works. It's not the best infotainment system in the world, but it's not the worst one either. And guess what? If you shut off the screen, you can still operate your car in its entirety. And that's the best part. This is just a radio and a device that makes sound to entertain you. That's all it does. Underneath it, HVAC controls. They're all physical button. And I love that. It just, certain things don't need to be changed. We don't need all these controls on the screen just to make it look cool. You don't need more than 2 seconds of thinking to operate it. And then going away from that, we do have this kind of button shifter. I don't like the button shifter, but I prefer this over a rotary dial. This is a byproduct of the ZF transmission that we talked about. So there is that. But there's not 17 million buttons here. You only have 2 buttons. Drive mode, auto start, stop, off. Very important buttons right in front of you. which is cool. Then we look at the steering wheel. Steering wheel heater button is on the steering wheel, which actually makes a lot of sense. Why wouldn't it be here? Cruise control on one side, radio controls and little screen on the other side. Very basic to operate, no thrills about it. Then the gauges. You have two mechanical gauges on the side and kind of a screen in the middle. It's not all screen and just pretending to be something else. No, it works good. It's not the highest tech screen in the world, but it gives you everything you need. Nothing more, nothing less. The seats, super comfortable seats. Very wide, very comfortable. Center console in the latest iteration of the Passport did get updated, did get bigger, which is nice. This is the thing about this interior. I mean, there's not a single material here that will wow you, but yet the whole interior as a whole, once you live with it, it is truly nice because there's no gimmicks. There's no nonsense. They're not pretending to be some exotic car that it isn't. No, everything is plastic, but it's well made. And the fit and finish here, for the most part, is really good. And that's what I like about it. There's no drama, there's no nonsense. Now, the ride in this car is very smooth. It's very refined and quiet, except in this particular Trail Sport model, because of the mud tires, you do have a little bit of a hum from the tires. It's very noticeable as soon as you drive it, but that is a sacrifice. But overall, if you didn't have these tires, this was a very quiet and refined ride for the category or segment that this SUV is in. Let's talk about the second row seat in the Honda Passport. I'm 5'7", this is my driving position. I do have decent knee room. I do have these very good actually headroom, even with the sunroof in this particular model. So this seat is actually pretty comfortable. You can comfortably sit adults here. The transmission hump is almost non-existent. It's very small, you can barely notice it. So that is a really cool thing. You do have a sunshade here to protect the kiddos' eyes, which is pretty nice. You do have some USB-C. You do have a household power outlet here, some AC vents. This does not have a completely separate zone for the rear, which is perfectly fine. This is not a very, very large SUV after all, but I can live with it. You can comfortably sit 3 adults here, which is pretty nice. Let's talk about some things I do not like about the Honda Passport. It actually has nothing to do with the car itself. That problem I have with it is called the Honda Pilot. If you look at the base model prices, this one starts at $42,400. The Pilot, which is a bigger SUV, has a third row seat, which if you don't want it, you can fold it down. You'll have exactly the same space as this one, if not more. It gets better gas mileage. In my opinion, has a better engine that has good updates. Is $39,900, but that's for a 2-wheel drive model. If you go into the 4-wheel drive model or all-wheel drive model, it is $42,000 flat. So it is $400 cheaper than the base model of this one. However, and to be fair with everything, if you go up in the trims, the Pilot does start to get more expensive. For example, this Trail Sport here, in the Pilot, it is a little bit more expensive. But here's the problem. At the base model level, and we're not talking like base model, and the Pilot starts at a sport model, you still have a lot of amenities. And it still has a better V6, third row seat. If you don't need it folded down, you have the same space. You get better gas mileage, and it's a 25 model. So why exactly wouldn't you buy a Pilot over this? Well, I don't need a third row seat. Yeah, but it's cheaper and better gas mileage on the highway. Just fold the third row seat and you have the same space. Am I missing something here? So should you buy a Honda Passport? Folks, I love this car for its good build quality, some old school qualities, and no nonsense interior. It's focused, it's functional, it's built well, and that is what every car buyer wants. There is one major fatal flaw in this car, and it has nothing to do with the car itself. It's called the excellent Honda Pilot. And when you look at base models, the Honda Pilot offers you more for a lesser price. More on every level. Better engine, in my opinion. Third row seat, which you can easily fold down if you don't want to use it, but it's there should you need it. You'll have exactly the same space, if not a little bit more. And you have a more updated car for less, which gets better gas mileage on the highway. That's my biggest problem. And usually manufacturers sometimes will do things like that. They will outcompete their car within, and this is a prime example of that. But in case you have a problem being a pilot and you just want to be a passport, here's the rundown of this car. Very good quality all over. Not wowing materials and exotic stuff. No, just average everything, but it's put together well, and that is a big thing. And the interior is a breath of fresh air. No nonsense, no gimmicks and drama and all of. No, it's just you open the door, you sit in it, you take your family around, you go to work, you come back, no drama, it just blends in your background, and life is wonderful. The only concern I have with this model is the VCM, that variable cylinder management stuff. That is known to have some issues down the road, and that is the only thing that stands against it reliability-wise. Otherwise, everything else is made well. I like that transmission. ZF makes really good transmissions, but I will leave you with one last thing, which is I just cannot get over. I will gladly go to a Honda dealership, admire this car for its no-nonsense interior, and then I'll take a Pilot home any day, because everything that this has that is good, the Pilot has it as well, for a lower price and better gas mileage and a more modern engine that is actually better, not worse. Folks, I hope this video was helpful and informative. I hope you learned something new. If you like it, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some other videos. Until the next video, folks, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and you have yourself a wonderful day.